Well, my dears, just when I have everything all figured out and I'm on top of it and I know what I'm doing, they change the procedures. So I trust we're on live and I trust you with me. Anyway, tonight I'm going to bring you a story by the man who is considered the fourth best crime writer of his day, behind Dashiell Hammett, Earl Stanley Gardner, and Raymond Chandler. And his name was Cornell Woolrich. Now, William Irish was his byline in Dime Detective magazine on this particular story, which was originally called It Had to Be Murder. It's based on H.G. Wells' short story, Through a Window. But it became retitled, and the title was Rear Window. Now, you may remember the Hitchcock movie, based on it with Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelly and Raymond Burr. Raymond Burr was the villain. This was before his starring in the Perry Mason TV series. Excuse me, my voice is interesting tonight. Anyway, Rear Window by William Irish, Cornell Woolrich. I didn't know their names. I'd never heard their voices. I didn't even know them by sight, strictly speaking, for their faces were too small to fill in with identifiable features at that distance. Yet I could have constructed a timetable of their comings and goings, their daily habits and activities. They were the rear window dwellers around me. Sure, I suppose it was a little bit like prying. Could even have been mistaken for the fevered concentration of a peeping Tom. That wasn't my fault. That wasn't the idea. The idea was my movements were strictly limited just around this time. I could get from the window to the bed and from the bed to the window, and that was all. The bay window was about the best feature my rear bedroom had in the warm weather. It was unscreened, so I had to sit with the light out, or I would have had every insect in the vicinity in on me. I couldn't sleep because I was used to getting plenty of exercise. I'd never acquired the habit of reading books to ward off boredom, so I hadn't that to turn to. Well, what should I do? Sit there with my eyes tightly shuttered? Just to pick a few at random. Straight over, and the window square, there was a young jitter couple, kids in their teens, only just married. It would have killed them to stay home one night. They were always in such a hurry to go wherever it was they went. They never remembered to turn out the lights. I don't think it missed once in all the time I was watching. But they never forgot altogether either. I was to learn to call this delayed action, as you will see. He had always come skittering madly back in about 5 minutes, probably from all the way down on the street, and rush around killing the switches, then fall over something in the dark on his way out. They gave me an inward chuckle, those two. The next house down, the windows already narrowed a little with perspective. There was a certain light in that one that always went out each night, too. Something about it used to make me a little sad. There was a woman living there with her child, a young widow, I suppose. I'd see her put the child to bed and then bend over and kiss her in a wistful sort of way. She'd shade the light off her and sit there painting her eyes and mouth. Then she'd go out. She'd never come back till the night was nearly spent. Once I was still up, and I looked, and she was sitting there motionless with her head buried in her arms. Something about it used to make me a little sad. The third one down no longer offered any insight. The windows were just slits, like in a medieval battlement, due to foreshortening. That brings us around to the one on the end. In that one, frontal vision came back full depth again, since it stood at right angles to the rest, my own included. sealing up the inner hollow all those houses backed on. I could see into it from the rounded projection of my bay window as freely as into a dollhouse with its rear wall sliced away and scaled down to about the same size. It was a flat building. Unlike all the rest, it had been constructed originally as such, not just cut up into furnished rooms. It topped them by 2 stories and had rear fire escapes to show for this distinction. But it was old. Evidently hadn't shown a profit. It was in the process of being modernized. Instead of clearing the entire building while the work was going on, they were doing it a flat at a time in order to lose as little rental income as possible. Of the 6 rearward flats it offered to view, the topmost one had already been completed but not yet rented. They were working on the 5th floor one now, disturbing the peace of everyone all up and down the inside of the block with their hammering and sawing. I felt sorry for the couple in the flat below. I used to wonder how they stood it with that bedlam going on above their heads. To make it worse, the wife was in chronic poor health. I could tell that even at a distance by the listless way she moved about over there and remained in her bathrobe without dressing. Sometimes I'd see her sitting by the window, holding her head. I used to wonder why he didn't have a doctor in to look her over, but maybe they couldn't afford it. He seemed to be out of work. Often their bedroom light was on late at night behind the drawn shade, as though she were unwell and he was sitting up with her. And one night in particular, he must have had to sit up with her all night. It remained on until nearly daybreak. Not that I sat watching all that time. But the light was still burning at 3 a.m. when I finally transferred from chair to bed to see if I could get a little sleep myself. And when I failed to and hopscotched back again around dawn, it was still peering wanly out behind the tan shade. Moments later, with the first brightening of day, it suddenly dimmed around the edges of the shade, and then shortly afterward, not that one, but a shade in one of the other rooms, for all of them alike had been drawn, went up, and I saw him standing there looking out. He was holding a cigarette in his hand. I couldn't see it, but I could tell it was that by the quick, nervous little jerks with which he kept putting his hand to his mouth, and the haze I saw rising around his head. Worried about her, I guess. I didn't blame him for that. Any husband would have been. She must have only just dropped off to sleep after night-long suffering. And then, in another hour or so, at the most, that sawing of wood and clattering of buckets was going to start in over them again. Well, it wasn't any of my business, I said to myself, but he really ought to get her out of there. If I had an ill wife on my hands. He was leaning slightly out, maybe an inch past the window frame, carefully scanning the back faces of all the houses abutting on the hollow square that lay before him. You can tell, even at a distance, when a person is looking fixedly. There's something about the way the head is held. And yet his scrutiny wasn't held fixedly to any one point. It was a slow, sweeping one, moving along the houses on the opposite side from me first. When it got to the end of them, I knew it would cross over to my side and come back along there. Before it did, I withdrew several yards inside my room to let it go safely by. I didn't want him to think I was sitting there prying into his affairs. There was still enough blue nightshade in my room to keep my slight withdrawal from catching his eye. When I returned to my original position, a moment or two later, he was gone. He had raised 2 more of the shades. The bedroom one was still down. I wondered vaguely why he had given that peculiar, comprehensive, semicircular stare at all the rear windows around him. There wasn't anyone at any of them at such an hour. It wasn't important, of course. It was just a little oddity. It failed to blend in with his being worried or disturbed about his wife. When you're worried or disturbed, that's an internal preoccupation. You stare vacantly at nothing at all. When you stare around you in a great sweeping arc at windows, that betrays external preoccupation, outward interest. One doesn't quite jibe with the other. To call such a discrepancy trifling is to add to its importance. Only someone like me, stewing in a vacuum of total idleness, would have noticed it at all. The flat remained lifeless after that, as far as could be judged by its windows. He must have either gone out or gone to bed himself. 3 of the shades remained at normal height. The one masking the bedroom remained down. Sam, my day houseman, came in not long after with my eggs and morning paper, and I had that to kill time with for a while. I stopped thinking about other people's windows and staring at them. The sun slanted down to one side of the hollow oblong all morning long. Then it shifted over to the other side for the afternoon. Then it started to slip off both alike, and it was evening again. Another day gone. The lights started to come on around the quadrangle. Here and there a wall played back like a sounding board, a snatch of radio program that was coming in too loud. If you listened carefully, you could hear an occasional clink of dishes mixed in, faint, far off. The chain of little habits that were their lives unreeled themselves. They were all bound in them tighter than the tightest straitjacket any jailer ever devised, though they all thought themselves free. The jitterbugs made their nightly dash for the great open spaces, forgot their lights. He came careening back, thumbed them out, and the place was dark until the early morning hours. The woman put her child to bed, leaned mournfully over its cot, then sat down with heavy despair to redden her mouth. In the 4th floor flat at right angles to the long interior street, the 3 shades had remained up, and the 4th shade had remained at full length all day long. I hadn't been conscious of that because I hadn't particularly been looking at it, thinking of it, until now. My eyes may have rested on those windows at times during the day, but my thoughts have been elsewhere. It was only when a light suddenly went up in the end room behind one of the raised shades, which was their kitchen, that I realized that the shades had been untouched like that all day. That also brought something else to my mind that hadn't been in it until now. I hadn't seen the woman all day. I hadn't seen any sign of life within those windows until now. He had come in from outside. The entrance was at the opposite side of their kitchen, away from the window. He'd left his hat on, so I knew he'd just come in from the outside. He didn't remove his hat, as though there was no one there to remove it for anymore. Instead, he pushed it farther to the back of his head by pronging a hand to the roots of his hair. That gesture didn't denote removal of perspiration, I knew. To do that, a person makes a sidewise sweep. This was up over his forehead. It indicated some sort of harassment or uncertainty. Besides, if he had been suffering from excess warmth, the first thing he would have done would be to take off his hat altogether. She didn't come out to greet him. The first link of the so strong chain of habit, of custom, that binds us all, had snapped wide open. She must be so ill she remained in bed, in the room behind the lowered shade, all day. I watched. He remained where he was, 2 rooms away from there. Expectancy became surprise. Surprise and comprehension. Funny, I thought, that he doesn't go into her, or at least go as far as the doorway, look in to see how she is. She must be so ill. Or maybe she was asleep, and he didn't want to disturb her. Then immediately, but how can he know for sure that she's asleep without at least looking in at her? He just came in by himself. He came forward and stood there by the window as he had at dawn. Sam had carried out my tray quite some time before, and my lights were out. I held my ground. I knew he couldn't see me within the darkness of the bay window. He stood there motionless for several minutes, and now his attitude was the proper one for inner preoccupation. He stood there looking downward at nothing, lost in thought. He's worried about her, I said to myself, as any man would be. It's the most natural thing in the world. Funny, though, he should leave her in the dark like that, without going near her. If he's worried, then why didn't he at least look in on her, on returning? Here was another of those trivial discrepancies between inward motivation and outward inclination. And just as I was thinking that, the original one that I had noted at daybreak repeated itself. His head went up with renewed alertness, and I could see it start to give that slow, circular sweep of interrogation around the panorama of rearward windows again. True, the light was behind him this time, but there was enough of it falling on him to show me the microscopic but continuous shift of direction his head made in the process. I remained carefully immobile until the distant glance had passed me safely by. Motion attracts. Why is he so interested in other people's windows? I wondered detachedly. And of course, an effective break to dwelling on that thought, too lingerally, clamped down almost at once. Look who's talking. What about you yourself? An important difference escaped me. I wasn't worried about anything. He, presumably, was. Down came the shades again. The lights stayed on behind their beige opaqueness, but behind the one that had remained down all along, the room remained dark. Time went by. Hard to say how much. A quarter of an hour, 20 minutes. A cricket chirped in one of the backyards. Sam came in to see if I wanted anything before he went home for the night. I told him no, I didn't. It was all right, run along. He stood there for a minute, head down. Then I saw him shake it slightly, as if it's something he didn't like. What's the matter? I asked. You know what that means. My old mammy told it to me, and she never told me a lie in her life. I never once seen it to miss either. What, the cricket? Anytime you hear one of them things, that's a sign of death, someplace close around. I swept the back of my hand at him. Well, it isn't in here, so don't let it worry you. He went out muttering stubbornly. It's somewhere close by, though. Somewhere not very far off. Got to be. The door closed after him, and I stayed there alone in the dark. It was a stifling night, much closer than the one before. I could hardly get a breath of air even by the open window at which I sat. I wondered how he, that unknown over there, could stand it behind those drawn shades. Then suddenly, just as idle speculation about this whole matter was about to alight on some fixed point in my mind, crystallize into something like suspicion, up came the shades again, and off it flitted, as formless as ever, and without having had a chance to come to rest on anything. He was in the middle windows, the living room. He'd taken off his coat and shirt, was bare-armed in his undershirt. He hadn't been able to stand it himself, I guess, the sultriness. I couldn't make out what he was doing at first. He seemed to be busy in a perpendicular up and down way rather than lengthwise. He remained in one place, but he kept dipping down out of sight and then straightening up into view again at irregular intervals. It was almost like some sort of calisthenic exercise, except that the dips and rises weren't evenly timed enough for that. Sometimes he'd stay down a long time. Sometimes he'd bob right up again. Sometimes he'd go down 2 or 3 times in rapid succession. There was some sort of a widespread black V railing him off from the window. Whatever it was, there was just a sliver of it showing above the upward inclination to which the windowsill deflected my line of vision. All it did was strike off the bottom of his undershirt to the extent of 1/16 of an inch, maybe, but I hadn't seen it there at other times, and I couldn't tell what it was. Suddenly he left it for the first time since the shades had gone up, came out around it to the outside, stooped down into another part of the room, and straightened again with an armful of what looked like varicolored pennants at the distance at which I was. He went back behind the V and allowed them to fall across the top of it for a moment and stay that way. He made one of his dips down out of sight and stayed that way a good while. The pennants slung across the V kept changing color in front of my eyes. I have very good sight. One moment they were white, the next red, the next blue. Then I got it. They were a woman's dresses, and he was pulling them down to him one by one, taking the topmost one each time. Suddenly they were all gone. The V was black and bare again, and his torso had reappeared. I knew what it was now and what he was doing. The dresses had told me. He confirmed it for me. He spread his arms to the ends of the V. I could see him heave and hitch as if exerting pressure, and suddenly the V had folded up, become a cubed wedge. Then he made rolling motions with his whole upper body, and the wedge disappeared off to one side. He had been packing a trunk, packing his wife's things into a large, upright trunk. He reappeared at the kitchen window presently, stood still for a moment. I saw him draw his arm across his forehead, not once, but several times, and then whip the end of it off into space. Sure, it was hard work for such a night. Then he reached up along the wall and took something down. Since with the kitchen he was in, my imagination had to supply a cabinet and a bottle. I could see the 2 or 3 quick passes his hand made to his mouth after that. I said to myself tolerantly, that's what 9 men out of 10 would do after packing a trunk. Take a good stiff drink. And if the 10th didn't, it would only be because he didn't have any liquor at hand. Then he came closer to the window again, and standing edgewise to the side of it, so that only a thin paring of his head and shoulders showed, peered watchfully out into the dark quadrilateral, along the line of windows, most of them unlighted by now, once more. He always started on the left-hand side, the side opposite mine, and made his circuit of inspection from there on around. That was the second time in one evening I'd seen him do that, and once at daybreak made 3 times altogether. I smiled mentally. You'd almost think he felt guilty about something. It was probably nothing, just an odd little habit, a quirk that he didn't know he had himself. I have them myself. Everyone does. He withdrew into the room again, and it blacked out. His figure passed into the one that was still lighted next to it, the living room. That blacked next. It didn't surprise me that the third room, the bedroom with the drawn shade, didn't light up on his entering there. He wouldn't want to disturb her, of course, particularly if she was going away tomorrow for her health, as his packing of her trunk showed. She needed all the rest she could get before making the trip. Simple enough for him to slip into bed in the dark. It did surprise me, though, when a match flare winked some time later, to have it still come from the darkened living room. He must be lying down in there, trying to sleep on a sofa or something for the night. He hadn't gone near the bedroom at all, was staying out of it altogether. That puzzled me, frankly. That was carrying solicitude almost too far. 10 minutes or so later, there was another match wink, still from that same living room window. He couldn't sleep. The night brooded down on both of us alike. The curiosity monger in the bay window, the chain smoker in the fourth floor flat, without giving any answer. The only sound was that interminable cricket. I was back at the window again with the first sun of morning, not because of him. My mattress was like a bed of hot coals. Sam found me there when he came in to get things ready for me. "You're going to be a wreck, Mr. Jeff," was all he said. First, for a while, there was no sign of life over there. Then suddenly, I saw his head bob up from somewhere down out of sight in the living room. So I knew I'd been right. He'd spent the night on a sofa or easy chair in there. Now, of course, he'd look in at her to see how she was, find out if she felt any better. That was only common, ordinary humanity. He hadn't been near her, so far as I could make out, since 2 nights before. He didn't. He dressed, and he went in the opposite direction, into the kitchen, and wolfed something in there, standing up and using both hands. Then he suddenly turned and moved offside, in the direction in which I knew the flat entrance to be, as if he had just heard some summons, like the doorbell. Sure enough, in a moment he came back, and there were 2 men with him in leather aprons, expressmen. I saw him standing by while they laboriously maneuvered that cubed black wedge out between them, in the direction they'd just come from. He did more than just stand by. He practically hovered over them, kept shifting from side to side. He was so anxious to see that it was done right. Then he came back alone, and I saw him swipe his arm across his head, as though it was he, not they, who was all heated up from the effort. So he was forwarding her trunk to wherever it was she was going. That was all. He reached up along the wall again and took something down. He was taking another drink. 2, 3. I said to myself, a little at a loss, yes, but he hadn't just packed a trunk this time. That trunk has been standing packed and ready since last night. Where does the hard work come in? The sweat and the need for a bracer. Now, at last, after all those hours, he finally did go into her. I saw his form pass through the living room and go beyond into the bedroom. Up went the shade that had been down all this time. Then he turned his head and looked around behind him in a certain way that was unmistakable, even from where I was. Not in one certain direction, as one looks at a person, but from side to side and up and down and all around as one looks at an empty room. He stepped back, bent a little, gave a fling of his arms, and an unoccupied mattress and bedding, upended over the foot of a bed, stayed that way, emptily curved. A second one followed a moment later. She wasn't in there. They used the expression delayed action. I found out then what it meant. For 2 days, a sort of formless uneasiness, a disembodied suspicion, I don't know what to call it, had been flitting and volplaning around in my mind like an insect looking for a landing place. More than once, just as it had been ready to settle, some slight thing, some slight reassuring thing, such as the raising of the shades after they'd been down unnaturally long, had been enough to keep it winging aimlessly, prevent it from staying still long enough for me to recognize it. The point of contact had been there all along, waiting to receive it. Now, for some reason, within a split second after he tossed over the empty mattresses, it landed, zoom, and the point of contact expanded or exploded, whatever you care to call it, into a certainty of murder. In other words, the rational part of my mind was far behind the instinctive, subconscious part. Delayed action. Now the one had caught up to the other. The thought message that sparked from the synchronization was, he's done something to her. I looked down and my hand was bunching the goods over my kneecap. It was knotted so tight, I forced it to open. I said to myself steadyingly, now wait a minute, be careful, go slow. You've seen nothing, you know nothing. You only have the negative proof that you don't see her anymore. Sam was standing there looking over at me from the pantry-way. He said accusingly, you ain't touched a thing, and your face looks like a sheet. It felt like one. It had that needling feeling when the blood has left it involuntarily. It was more to get him out of the way and give myself some elbow room for undisturbed thinking than anything else that I said, Sam, what's the street address of that building down there? Don't stick your head too far out and gape at it. Something or other, Benedict Avenue. He scratched his neck helpfully. I know that. Chase around the corner a minute and get me the exact number on it, will you? Why you want to know that for? He asked as he turned to go. None of your business, I said with the good-natured firmness that was all that was necessary to take care of that once and for all. I called after him just as he was closing the door, and while you're at it, step into the entrance and see if you can tell from the mailboxes who has the 4th floor rear. Don't get me the wrong one now, and try not to let anyone catch you at it. He went out mumbling something that sounded like, when a man ain't got nothing to do but just sit all day, he sure can think up the blamedest things. The door closed, and I settled down to some good constructive thinking. I said to myself, what are you really building up this monstrous supposition on? Let's see what you've got. Only that there were several little things wrong with the mechanism, the chain belt of their recurrent daily habits over there. 1. The lights were on all night the first night. 2. He came in later than usual the second night. 3. He left his hat on. 4. She didn't come out to greet him. She hasn't appeared since the evening before the lights were on all night. 5. He took a drink after he finished packing her trunk, but he took 3 stiff drinks the next morning, immediately after her trunk went out. 6. He was inwardly disturbed and worried, yet superimposed upon this was an unnatural external concern, about the surrounding rear windows. That was off-key. 7, he slept in the living room, didn't go near the bedroom during the night before the departure of the trunk. Very well. If she had been ill that first night and he had sent her away for her health, that automatically canceled out points 1, 2, 3, 4. It left points 5 and 6 totally unimportant and unincriminating. But when it came up against 7, it hit a stumbling block. If she went away immediately after being ill that first night, why didn't he want to sleep in their bedroom last night? Sentiment? Hardly. 2 perfectly good beds in one room, only a sofa or uncomfortable easy chair in the other. Why should he stay out of there? She was already gone. Just because he missed her? Was lonely? A grown man doesn't act that way. All right, then she was still in there. Sam came back parenthetically at this point and said, "That house is number 525 Benedict Avenue, the 4th floor rear. It got the name of Mr. and Mrs. Lars Thorwald up." "Shh," I silenced and motioned him backhand out of my ken. "First he want it, then he don't," he grumbled philosophically and retired to his duties. I went ahead digging at it. But if she was still in there, in that bedroom last night, then she couldn't have gone away to the country, because I never saw her leave today. She could have left without my seeing her in the early hours of yesterday morning. I'd missed a few hours, been asleep, but this morning I'd been up before he was himself. I only saw his head rear up from that sofa after I'd been at the window for some time. To go at all, she would have had to go yesterday morning. Then why had he left the bedroom shade down, left the mattresses undisturbed until today? Above all, why had he stayed out of that room last night? That was evidence that she hadn't gone, was still in there. Then today, immediately after the trunk had been dispatched, he went in, pulled up the shade, tossed over the mattresses, and showed that she hadn't been in there. The thing was like a crazy spiral. No, it wasn't either. Immediately after the trunk had been dispatched, the trunk, that did it. I looked around to make sure the door was safely closed between Sam and me. My hand hovered uncertainly over the telephone dial a minute. Boyne. He'd be the one to tell about it. He was on homicide. He had been anyway when I'd last seen him. I didn't want to get a flock of strange dicks and cops into my hair. I didn't want to be involved any more than I had to, or at all, if possible. They switched my call to the right place after a couple of wrong tries, and I got him finally. "Look, Boyne, this is Hal Jeffries." "Well, where have you been the last 62 years? He started to enthuse. "We can take that up later. What I want you to do now is take down a name and address. Ready? Lars Thorwald, 525 Benedict Avenue, 4th floor rear. Got it? 4th floor rear. Got it. What's it for?" "Investigation. I've got a firm belief you'll uncover a murder there if you start digging at it. Don't call on me for anything more than that, just a conviction. There's been a man and wife living there until now. Now there's just the man. Her trunk went out early this morning. If you can find someone who saw her leave, herself." Marshaled aloud like that and conveyed to somebody else, a lieutenant of detectives above all. It did sound flimsy, even to me. He said hesitantly, "Well, but..." Then he accepted it as it was, because I was the source. even left my window out of it completely. I could do that with him and get away with it because he'd known me years. He didn't question my reliability. I didn't want my room all cluttered up with dicks and cops taking turns nosing out of the window in this hot weather. Let them tackle it from the front. Well, we'll see what we see, he said. I'll keep you posted. I hung up and sat back to watch and wait events. I had a grandstand seat, or rather, a grandstand seat in reverse. I could only see from behind the scenes, but not from the front. I couldn't watch Boyne go to work. I could only see the results, when and if there were any. I hung up, but nothing happened. I had hung up. Nothing happened for the next few hours. The police work that I knew must be going on was invisible as police work should be. The figure in the fourth-floor windows over there remained in sight, alone and undisturbed. He didn't go out. He was restless, roamed from room to room without staying in one place very long, but he stayed in. Once I saw him eating again, sitting down this time, and once he shaved, and once he even tried to read the paper, but he didn't stay with it long. Little unseen wheels were in motion around him, small and harmless as yet, preliminaries. If he knew, I wondered to myself, would he remain there quiescent like that? Or would he try to bolt out and flee? That mightn't depend so much upon his guilt as upon his sense of immunity, his feeling that he could outwit them. Of his guilt, I myself was already convinced, or I wouldn't have taken the step I had. At 3, my phone rang, Boyne calling back. Jeffries? Well, I don't know. Can't you give me a little more than just a bald statement like that? Why? I fenced. Why do I have to? I've had a man over there making inquiries. I've just had his report. The building superintendent and several of the neighbors all agree she left for the country to try and regain her health early yesterday morning. Wait a minute. Did any of them see her leave, according to your man? No. Then all you've gotten is a second-hand version of an unsupported statement by him, not an eyewitness account. He was met returning from the depot after he had bought her ticket and seen her off on the train. That's still an unsupported statement, once removed. I've sent a man down there to the station to try and check with the ticket agent, if possible. After all, he should have been fairly conspicuous at that early hour. And we're keeping him under observation, of course, in the meantime, watching all his movements. The first chance we get, we're going to jump in and search the place. I had a feeling they wouldn't find anything, even if they did. Don't expect anything more from me. I've dropped it in your lap. I've given you all I have to give, a name, an address, and an opinion. Yes, and I've always valued your opinion highly before now, Jeff. But now you don't. That it? Not at all. The thing is, we haven't turned up anything that seems to bear out your impression so far. You haven't gotten very far along so far. He went back to his previous cliche. Well, we'll see what we see. Let you know later. Another hour or so went by and sunset came on. I saw him start to get ready to go out over there. He put on his hat, put his hand in his pocket, and stood still, looking at it for a minute. Counting change, I guess. It gave me a peculiar sense of suppressed excitement, knowing they were going to come in the minute he left. I thought grimly as I saw him take a last look around, if you've got anything to hide, brother, now's the time to hide it. He left. A breath-holding interval of misleading emptiness descended on the flat. A 3-alarm fire couldn't have pulled my eyes off those windows. Suddenly, the door by which he had just left parted slightly, and two men insinuated themselves, one behind the other. There they were now. They closed it behind them, separated at once, and got busy. One took the bedroom, one the kitchen, and they started to work their way toward one another again from those extremes of the flat. They were thorough. I could see them going over everything from top to bottom. They took the living room together. One cased one side, the other man the other. They had already finished before the warning caught them. I could tell that by the way they straightened up and stood facing one another, frustratedly for a minute. Then both their heads turned sharply, as at a tip-off by doorbell that he was coming back. They got out fast. I wasn't unduly disheartened. I'd expected that. My own feeling all along had been that they wouldn't find anything incriminating around. The trunk had gone. He came in with a mountainous brown paper bag sitting in the curve of one arm. I watched him closely to see if he had discovered that someone had been there in his absence. Apparently he didn't. There had been a droid about it. He stayed in the rest of the night, sat tight, safe and sound. He did some desultory drinking. I could see him sitting there by the window, and his hand would hoist every once in a while, but not to excess. Apparently, everything was under control. The tension had eased now that the trunk was out. Watching him across the night, I speculated, why doesn't he get out? If I'm right about him, and I am, why does he stick around after it? That brought its own answer. Because he doesn't know anyone's onto him yet. He doesn't think there's any hurry. To go too soon, right after she has, would be more dangerous than to stay a while. The night wore on. I sat there waiting for Boyne's call. It came later. Sorry about that. It came later than I thought it would. I picked the phone up in the dark. He was getting ready to go to bed over there now. He had risen from where he'd been drinking in the kitchen and put the light out. He went into the living room, lit that. He started to pull his shirt tail up out of his belt. Boyne's voice was in my ear as my eyes were on him over there. Three-cornered arrangement. Hello, Jeff? Listen, absolutely nothing. We searched the place while he was out. I nearly said, I know you did, I saw it, but checked myself in time. And didn't turn up a thing, but... He stopped as though this was going to be important. I waited impatiently for him to go ahead. Downstairs in his letterbox, we found a postcard waiting for him. We fished it up out of the slot with bent pins. And it was from his wife, written only yesterday from some farm up country. Here's the message we copied. Arrived okay, already feeling a little better. Love, Anna. I said faintly but stubbornly, you say written only yesterday. Have you proof of that? What was the postmark date on it? He made a disgusted sound down in his tonsils. At me, not it. The postmark was blurred. A corner of it got wet, and the ink smudged. All of it blurred? The year date, he admitted. The hour and the month came out okay. August, and 7:30 p.m. it was mailed at. This time I made the disgusted sound in my larynx. August, 7:30 p.m., 1937 or 1939 or 1942. You have no proof how it got into that mailbox, whether it came from a letter carrier's pouch or from the back of some bureau drawer. Give it up, Jeff, he said. There's such a thing as going too far. I don't know what I would have said. That is, if I hadn't happened to have my eyes on the Thorwald flat living room windows just then. Probably very little. The postcard had shaken me, whether I admitted it or not. But I was looking over there. The light had gone out as soon as he'd taken his shirt off, but the bedroom didn't light up. A match flare winked from the living room low down, as from an easy chair or sofa. With two unused beds in the bedroom, He was still staying out of there. "Boyne," I said in a glassy voice, "I don't care what postcards from the other world you've turned up. I say that man has done away with his wife. Trace that trunk he shipped out. Open it up when you've located it, and I think you'll find her." And I hung up without waiting to hear what he was going to do about it. He didn't ring back, so I suspected he was going to give my suggestion a spin after all, in spite of his loudly proclaimed skepticism. I stayed there by the window all night, keeping a sort of death watch. There were 2 more match flares after the first, at about half-hour intervals. Nothing more after that. So possibly he was asleep over there. Possibly not. I had to sleep sometime myself, and I finally succumbed in the flaming light of the early sun. Anything that he was going to do, he would have done under cover of darkness, and not waited for broad daylight. There wouldn't be anything much to watch for a while now. And what was there that he needed to do any more anyway? Nothing. Just sit tight and let a little disarming time slip by. It seemed like 5 minutes later that Sam came over and touched me, but it was already high noon. I said irritably, "Didn't you lamp that note I pinned up for you to let me sleep?" He said, "Yeah, but it's your old friend Inspector Boyd. I figured you'd sure want to." Boyd began in a galvanized iron voice. "Jeff, what do you mean by doing something like this to me? I've made a fool out of myself, thanks to you, sending my men out right and left on wild goose chases. Thank God I didn't put my foot in it any worse than I did and have this guy picked up and brought in for questioning. Look, I'm not alone in the department, you know. There are men over me I'm accountable for my actions. That looks great, don't it? Sending one of my fellows 1 half-day's train ride up into the sticks to some godforsaken whistle-stop or other at departmental expense. Then you located the trunk? We traced it through the express agency," he said flintily. "And you opened it?" "We did better than that. We got in touch with the various farmhouses in the immediate locality, and Mrs. Thorwald came down to the junction in a produce truck from one of them and opened it for him herself with her own keys." Very few men have ever gotten a look from an old friend such as I got from him. At the door, he said, stiff as a rifle barrel, "Let's just forget all about it, shall we? That's about the kindest thing either one of us can do for the other. You're not yourself, and I'm out a little of my own pocket money, time, and temper. Let's let it go at that. If you want to telephone me in future, I'll be glad to give you my home number." For about 10 minutes after he stormed out, my numbed mind was in a sort of straitjacket. Then it started to wriggle its way free. The hell with the police. I can't prove it to them, maybe, but I can prove it to myself one way or another. Once and for all. Either I'm wrong or I'm right. He's got his armor on against them, but his back is naked and unprotected against me. I called Sam in. "Whatever became of that spyglass we used to have when we were bumming around on that cabin cruiser that season?" He found it someplace downstairs and came in with it, blowing on it and rubbing it along his sleeve. I let it lay idle in my lap at first. I took a piece of paper and a pencil and wrote 6 words on it. "What have you done with her?" I sealed it in an envelope and left the envelope blank. I said to Sam, "Now here's what I want you to do, and I want you to be slick about it. You take this, go in that building, 525, climb the stairs to the 4th floor rear, and ease it under the door. Let's see if you're fast enough to keep from being caught at it. Then when you get safely down again, give the outside bell, a little poke to attract attention. And don't ask any questions. I'm not fooling." He went and I got the spyglass ready. I got him in the right focus after a minute or two. A face leaped up and I was really seeing him for the first time. Dark-haired but unmistakable. Scandinavian ancestry. Looked like a sinewy customer. although he didn't run to much bulk. About 5 minutes went by. His head turned sharply profilewards. That was the bell poke right there. The note must be in already. He gave me the back of his head as he went toward the flat door. The lens could follow him all the way to the rear, where my unaided eyes hadn't been able to before. He opened the door first, missed seeing it, looked out on a level. He closed it. Then he dipped, straightened up. He had it. I could see him turning it this way and that. He shifted in, away from the door, nearer the window. He didn't know it was the other way around. The deeper into his own rooms he retreated, the greater the danger. He had torn it open. He was reading it. God, how I watched his expression. My eyes clung to it like leeches. There was a sudden widening, a pulling. The whole skin of his face seemed to stretch back behind the ears, narrowing his eyes to mongoloids. Shock, panic. His hand pushed out and found the wall, and he braced himself with it. Then he went back toward the door again, slowly. I could see him creeping up to it, stalking it as if it was something alive. He opened it so slenderly you couldn't see it at all, peered fearfully through the crack. Then he closed it, and he came back, zigzag, off balance from sheer reflex dismay. He toppled into a chair and snatched up a drink, out of the bottleneck itself this time. And even while he was holding it to his lips, his head was turned, looking over his shoulder at the door that had suddenly thrown his secret in his face. I put the glass down. Guilty. Guilty as all hell, and the police be damned. My hand started toward the phone, came back again. What was the use? You should have seen his face, and I could hear Boyne's answer. Anyone gets a jolt from an anonymous letter, true or false, you would yourself. I, from my window, had to show them a body. Well, he'd have to show me first. I kept pegging away at it while the afternoon wore away. Meanwhile, he was pacing back and forth there like a caged panther. Two minds with but one thought, turned inside out in my case. How to keep it hidden, how to see that it wasn't kept hidden. The customary sights and sounds around me went on unnoticed, while the mainstream of my thoughts pounded like a torrent against that one obstacle. How to get him to give the location away to me, so that I could give it away in turn to the police. I was dimly conscious, I remember, of the landlord or somebody bringing in a prospective tenant to look at the 6th floor apartment, the one that had already been finished. This was 2 over Thorwalds. They were still at work on the in-between one. At one point, an odd little bit of synchronization, completely accidental, of course, cropped up. Landlord and tenant both happened to be near the living room windows on the 6th, at the same moment that Thorwald was near those on the 4th. Both parties moved onward simultaneously into the kitchen from there, and, passing the blind spot of the wall, appeared next at the kitchen windows. It was uncanny. They were almost like precision strollers or puppets manipulated on one and the same string. It probably wouldn't have happened again just like that in another 50 years. The thing was, something about it had disturbed me. I tried for a moment or two to figure it had been, and couldn't. The landlord and tenant had gone now, and only Thorwald was in sight. It sank into my subconscious to ferment there like yeast while I went back to the main problem at hand. I got it finally. It was well after dark, but I finally hit on a way. An alarmed turn of the head, a brief precautionary step in one certain direction was all I needed. And to get this brief, flickering, transitory giveaway, I needed 2 phone calls and an absence of about half an hour on his part between them. I leafed a dictionary by matchlight until I found what I wanted. Thorwald, Lars, 525 Benedict, Swansea, 52114. I blew out the match, picked up the phone. It was like television. I could see to the other end of my call, not only along the wire, but by a direct channel of vision from window to window. He said, "Hello?" gruffly. I thought, how strange this is. I've been accusing him of murder for 3 days straight, and only now I'm hearing his voice for the first time. I didn't try to disguise my own voice. After all, he'd never see me, and I'd never see him. I said, "You got my note?" He said guardedly, "Who is this?" "Just somebody who happens to know." "Know what?" "Know what you know. You and I, we're the only ones." Through the window, I saw him pull open the collar of his shirt as though its stricture was intolerable. Then he backed his hand over his eyes like you do when there's a light blinding you. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Business, that's what I'm talking about. It should be worth something to me, shouldn't it? To keep it from going further?" I wanted to keep him from catching on that it was the windows. I still needed them. I needed them now more than ever. "You weren't very careful about your door the other night. Or maybe the draft swung it open a little." That hit him where he lived. Even the stomach heave reached me over the wire. "You didn't see anything. There wasn't anything to see." "That's up to you. Why should I go to the police?" I coughed a little. "If it would pay me not to." "Oh," he said, and there was relief of a sort in it. "Do you want to see me? Is that it?" "That would be the best way, wouldn't it? How much can you bring with you for now?" "I've only got about $70 around here." "All right, then we can arrange the rest for later. Do you know where Lakeside Park is? I'm near there now. Suppose we make it there." That was about 30 minutes away, 15 there and 15 back. "There's a little pavilion as you go in." "How many of you are there?" he asked cautiously. "Just me. It pays to keep things to yourself. That way you don't have to divvy up." He seemed to like that too. "I'll take a run out," he said, "just to see what it's about." I watched him more closely than ever after he had hung up. He flitted straight through to the end room, the bedroom, that he didn't go near anymore. He disappeared into a clothes closet in there, stayed a minute, came out again. He must have taken something out of a hidden cranny or niche in there that the Dicks had missed. I could tell by the pistol-like motion of his hand, just before it disappeared inside his coat, what it was. A gun. It's a good thing, I thought, I'm not out there in Lakeside Park waiting for my $70. The place blacked and he was on his way. I called Sam in. "I want you to do something for me that's a little risky, in fact, damn risky. I wouldn't tell you to do anything like that if I could do it myself, but I can't and it's got to be done." Then I told him, "Go out the back way, cross the backyard fences, and see if you can get into that 4th floor flat up the fire escape. He's left one of the windows down a little from the top." "What do you want me to look for?" "Nothing. The police had been there already, so what was the good of that? There are 3 rooms over there. I want you to disturb everything just a little bit in all 3 to show someone's been in there. Turn up the edge of each rug a little. Shift the chairs and tables around a little. Leave the closet door standing open. Don't pass up a thing. Here, keep your eyes on this." I took off my own wristwatch, strapped it on him. "You've got 25 minutes starting from now. If you stay within those 25 minutes, nothing will happen to you. When you see they're up, don't wait any longer. Get out and get out fast." Climb back down? No. He wouldn't remember in his excitement if he'd left the windows up or not, and I didn't want him to connect danger with the back of his place, but with the front. I wanted to keep my own window out of it. Latch the window down tight, let yourself out the door, and beat it out of the building the front way. He came up through our own basement door below me and scrambled over the fences. He made it pretty good for someone his age. He isn't so young anymore. Even the fire escape backing the flat, which was drawn up short, he managed to contact by standing on something. He got in, lit the light, looked over at me. I motioned him to go ahead, not weaken. I watched him at it. I had to stay in back behind the scenes. I couldn't get in front of him as a lookout and shield him. Even the Dicks had a lookout posted. He must have been tense doing it. Finally, he came over to the window, latched it fast. The lights went and he was out. He had made it. I heard him keying the street door, and when he came up, I said warningly, "Leave the light out in here. Go and build yourself a great big 2-story whiskey punch." Thorwald came back 29 minutes after he'd left. A pretty slim margin to hang a man's life on. So now for the finale of the long-winded business, and here was hoping. I got my second phone call in before he had time to notice anything amiss. It was tricky timing, but I'm sitting there with the receiver ready in my hand, dialing the number over and over, then killing it each time. He came in on the 2 of 52114, and I saved that much time. This was the one that was going to tell the story. "You were supposed to bring money, not a gun. That's why I didn't show up." I saw the jolt that threw into him. "I saw you tap the inside of your coat where you had it as you came out on the street." Well, you usually do when you're packing a gun and aren't an habitual carrier. "Too bad you had your trip out and back for nothing. I didn't waste our time while you were gone, though. I know more now than I knew before. I find out where it is. You know what I mean. I know now where you've got it. I was there while you were out." Not a word, just quick breathing. "Don't you believe me? Look around. Put the receiver down and take a look for yourself. I found it." He put it down, moved as far as the living room entrance, and touched off the lights. He just looked around him once, in a sweeping, all-embracing stare. He was smiling grimly when he came back to the phone. All he said, softly and with malignant satisfaction, was, "You're a liar." And I saw him lay the receiver down and take his hand off it. I hung up. The test had failed, and yet it hadn't. He hadn't given the location away, and yet that "you're a liar" was a tacit admission that it was there to be found somewhere around him, in such a good place that he didn't have to worry about it, didn't even have to look to make sure. He was standing there with his back to me, and I couldn't see what he was doing. I knew the phone was somewhere in front of him, but I thought he was just standing there, pensive behind it. His head was slightly lowered, that was all. I'd hung up at my end. I didn't even see his elbow move, and if his index finger did, I couldn't see it. He stood like that for a moment or two, then finally he moved aside. The lights went out over there. I lost him. My mind no longer distracted by having him to look at, I turned to trying to recapture something else, that troublesome little hitch in synchronization that had occurred this afternoon, when the rental agent and he both moved simultaneously from one window to the next. The windows had been open, and I hadn't been using the lens at the time. My phone rang. Boyne, I supposed. It wouldn't be anyone else at this hour. Maybe, after reflecting on the way he jumped all over me, I said, "Hello," unguardedly in my own normal voice. There wasn't any answer. I said, "Hello? Hello? Hello?" I kept giving away samples of my voice. There wasn't a sound from first to last. I hung up finally. It was still dark over there, I noticed. Sam looked in to check out. He was a bit thick-tongued from his restorative drink. He said something about, "All right, if I go now?" I half heard him. I was trying to figure out another way of trapping him over there into giving away the right spot. I nodded my consent absently. He went a little unsteadily down the stairs to the ground floor, and after a delaying moment or two, I heard the street door close after him. Poor Sam. He wasn't much used to liquor. I was left alone in the house. One chair, the limit of my freedom of movement. Suddenly a light went on over there again, just momentarily, to go right out again afterwards. He must have needed it for something, to locate something that he'd already been looking for, and found he wasn't able to put his hands on readily without it. He found it, whatever it was, almost immediately, and moved back at once to put the lights out again. As he turned to do so, I saw him give a glance out the window. He didn't come to the window to do it, he just shot it out in passing. Something about me struck me as different from all the others I'd seen him give in all the time I'd been watching him. If you can qualify such an elusive thing as a glance, I would have termed it a glance with a purpose. It was certainly anything but vacant or random. It had a bright spot of fixity in it. It hit dead center on my bay window for just a split second while it lasted. And the lights were gone, and he was gone. Sometimes your senses take things in without your mind translating them into their proper meaning. My eyes saw that look. My mind refused to smell it properly. It was meaningless, I thought, an unintentional bullseye that just happened to hit square over here as he went toward the lights on his way out. Delayed action. A wordless ring of the phone. To test a voice? A period of bated darkness following that, in which two could have played at the same game, stalking one another's window squares unseen. A last-moment flicker of the lights that was bad strategy but unavoidable. A parting glance, retroactive with malignant intention. All these things sank in without fusing. My eyes did their job. It was my mind that didn't, or at least took its time about it. Seconds went by in packages of 60. It was very still, sort of a breathless stillness. And then a sound came up, the unmistakable spaced clicking a cricket makes in the silence of the night. I thought of Sam's superstition about them. If that was the case, it looked bad for somebody in one of these slumbering houses around here. Sam had been gone only 10 minutes, and now he was back again. He must have forgotten something. That drink was responsible. He knew I couldn't come down and let him in, and he was trying to be quiet about it, thinking perhaps I'd dozed off. All I could hear was this faint jingling down at the lock of the front door. It was one of those old-fashioned stoop houses with an outer pair of storm doors that were allowed to swing free all night, and then a small vestibule, and then the inner door, worked by a simple iron key. The liquor had made his hand a little unreliable, although he had had this difficulty once or twice before. The sound had stopped now. He must have given up, gone away again, decided to let whatever it was go until tomorrow. He hadn't gotten in because I knew his noisy way of letting doors coast shut by themselves too well. Then suddenly it exploded. Why at this particular moment, I don't know. There was some mystery of the inner workings of my own mind. It flashed like waiting gunpowder, which a spark has finally reached along a slow train. More of that delayed action. Damn that delayed action. The renting agent and Thorwald had both started even from the living room window. An intervening gap of blind wall, and both had reappeared at the kitchen window, still one above the other. But some sort of a hitch or flaw or jump had taken place right there that bothered me. There wasn't anything the matter with their timing. It was with their parallelness, or whatever the word is. The hitch had been vertical, not horizontal. There had been an upward jump. Now I had it. Now I knew, and it couldn't wait. It was too good. They wanted a body. Now I had one for them. Soon, sore or not, Bourne would have to listen to me now. I didn't waste any time. I dialed his precinct house then and there in the dark. They didn't make much noise, the slots on the rotary dial, going around, just a light click. He went home long ago, the desk sergeant said. This couldn't wait. All right, give me his home phone number. He took a minute, came back again. Trafalgar, he said. Then nothing more. Well, Trafalgar what? Not a sound. Hello? Hello? I tapped it. Operator, I've been cut off. Give me that party again. I couldn't get her either. I hadn't been cut off. My wire had been cut. That had been too sudden, right in the middle of... And to be cut like that, it would have to be done somewhere right inside the house with me. Outside, it went underground. Delayed action. This time final, fatal, altogether too late. A voiceless ring of the phone, a direction finder of a look from over there. Sam seemingly trying to get back in a while ago. Surely death was somewhere inside the house here with me, and I couldn't move. I couldn't get up out of this chair. Even if I had gotten through to Boyne just now, it would have been too late. There wasn't time enough for one of those camera finishes in this. I could have shouted out the window, that gallery of sleeping rear window neighbors around me, I supposed. It would have brought them to the windows. It wouldn't have brought them over here in time. I didn't open my mouth, not because I was brave, but because it was so obviously useless. He'd be up in a minute. He must be on the stairs now, although I couldn't hear him, not even a creak. A creak would have been a relief, would have placed him. There wasn't a weapon in the place with me. There were hooks there on the wall, within reach. There were books. Me, who never read. The former owner's books. There was a bust of Rousseau or Montesquieu. I'd never been able to decide which. One of those gents with flowing manes topping them. It was a monstrosity, bisque clay, but it was too dated. It too dated from before my occupancy. I arched my middle upward from the chair seat and clawed desperately up at it. Twice my fingertips slipped off it. Then at the third raking, I got it to teeter, and the fourth brought it down into my lap, pushing me down into the chair. There was a steamer rug under me. I didn't need it around me in this weather. I'd been using it to soften the seat of the chair. I tugged it out from under and mantled it around me like an Indian braves blanket. Then I squirmed far down in the chair, let my head and one shoulder dangle out over the arm. On the side next to the wall, I hoisted the bust to my other upward shoulder, balanced it there precariously for a second head, blanket tucked around its ears. From the back, in the dark, it would look, I hoped. I proceeded to breathe adenoidally, like someone in heavy, upright sleep. It wasn't hard. My own breath was coming nearly that labored anyway, from tension. He was good with knobs and hinges and things. I never heard the door open. And this one, unlike the one downstairs, was right behind me. A little eddy of air puffed through the dark at me. I could feel it because my scalp, the real one, was all wet at the roots of the hair right then. If it was going to be a knife or a head blow, the dodge might give me a second chance. That was the most I could hope for, I knew. My arms and shoulders are hefty. I'd bring him down on me in a bear hug after the first slash or drive and break his neck or collarbone against me. If it was going to be a gun, he'd get me anyway in the end. A difference of a few seconds. He had a gun, I knew, that he was going to use on me in the open over at Lakeside Park. I was hoping that here, indoors, time was up. The flash of the shot lit up the room for a second. It was so dark, or at least the corners of it, like flickering weak lightning. The bust bounced on my shoulder and disintegrated into chunks. I thought he was jumping up and down on the floor for a minute with frustrated rage. Then when I saw him dart by me and lean over the windowsill to look for a way out, the sound transferred itself rearwards and downwards, became a pummeling with hoof and hip at the street door. The camera finish, after all. But he still could have killed me 5 times. I flung my body down into the narrow crevice between chair arm and wall, but my legs were still up, and so was my head and that one shoulder. He whirled, fired at me so close that it was like looking a sunrise in the face. I didn't feel it, so it hadn't hit. "You," I heard him grunt to himself. I think it was the last thing he said. The rest of his life was all action, not verbal. He flung over the sill on one arm and dropped into the yard. A 2-story drop. He made it because he missed the cement, landed on the sod strip in the middle. I jacked myself over the chair arm and flung myself bodily forward at the window, nearly hitting it chin first. He went all right. When life depends on it, you go. He took the first fence, rolled over that bellywoods. He went over the second like a cat, hands and feet pointed together in a spring. Then he was back in the rear yard of his own building. He got up on something, just about like Sam had. The rest was all footwork, with quick little corkscrew twists at each landing stage. Sam had latched his windows down when he was over there, but he'd reopened one of them for ventilation on his return. His whole life depended now on that casual, unthinking little act. Second, third, he was up to his own windows. He had made it. Something went wrong. He veered out away from them in another pretzel twist, flashed up toward the 5th, the one above. Something sparked in the darkness of one of his own windows where he'd been just now, and a shot thudded heavily out around the quadrangle enclosure, like a big bass drum. He passed the 5th, the 6th, got up to the roof. He had made it a second time. Gee, he loved life. The guys in his own windows couldn't get him. He was over them in a straight line, and there was too much fire escape interlacing in the way. I was too busy watching him to watch what was going on around me. Suddenly Boyne was next to me, sight him. I heard him mutter, "I almost hate to do this. He's got to fall so far." He was balanced on the roof parapet up there, with a star right over his head. An unlucky star. He stayed a minute too long, trying to kill before he was killed. Or maybe he was killed and knew it. A shot cracked high up against the sky. The window pane flew apart all over the two of us, and one of the books snapped right behind me. Boyne didn't say anything more about hating to do it. My face was pressing outward against his arm. The recoil of his elbow jarred my teeth. I blew a clearing through the smoke to watch him go. It was pretty horrible. He took a minute to show us anything, standing up there on the parrot. Then he let his gun go, as if to say, "I won't need this anymore." Then he went after it. He missed the fire escape entirely, came all the way down on the outside. He landed so far out he hit one of the projecting planks down there out of sight. It bounced his body up like a springboard. Then it landed again for good, and that was all. I said to Boyne, I got it finally. The 5th floor flat, the one over his that they're still working on. The cement kitchen floor raised above the level of the other rooms. They wanted to comply with the fire laws and also obtain a dropped living room effect as cheaply as possible. Dig it up. He went right over there, then and there, down through the basement and over the fences to save time. The electricity wasn't turned on yet in that one. They had to use their torches. It didn't take them long at that, once they got started. In about half an hour, he came to the window and wig-wagged over for my benefit. It meant yes. He didn't come over until nearly 8 in the morning after they'd tidied up and taken them away, both away, the hot dead and the cold dead. He said, "Jeff, I take it all back. That damn fool that I sent up there about the trunk, well, it wasn't his fault in a way. I'm to blame. He didn't have orders to check on the woman's description, only on the contents of the trunk. He came back and touched on it in a general way. I go home and I'm in bed already, and suddenly pop into my brain, one of the tenants I questioned 2 whole days ago had given us a few details, and they didn't tally with his on several important parts. Talk about being slow to catch on. I've had that all the way through this damn thing," I admitted ruefully. "I call it delayed action. It nearly killed me. I'm a police officer and you're not. That how you happen to shine at the right time?" "Sure. We came over to pick him up for questioning. I left them planted there when we saw he wasn't in, and came over here by myself to square it up with you while we were waiting. How did you happen to hit on that cement floor?" I told him about the freak synchronization. The renting agent showed up taller at the kitchen window in proportion to Thorwald than he had been a moment before when they both were at the living room windows together. It was no secret they were putting in cement floors, topped by a cork composition, and raising them considerable. But it took on new meaning. Since the top floor one has been finished for some time, it had to be the 5th. Here's the way I have it lined up, just in theory. She's been in ill health for years, and he's been out of work, and he got sick of that and of her both. Met this other. She'll be here later today. They're bringing her down under arrest. He probably insured her for all he could get and then started to poison her slowly, trying not to leave any trace. I imagine, and remember this is pure conjecture, she caught him at it that night the light was on all night. Caught on in some way or caught him in the act. He lost his head and did the very thing he had wanted all along to avoid doing. Killed her by violence, strangulation or a blow. The rest had to be hastily improvised. He got a better break than he deserved at that. He thought of the apartment upstairs, went up and looked around. They'd just finished laying the floor. The cement hadn't hardened yet, and the materials were still around. He gouged a trough out of it just wide enough to take her body, put her in it, mixed fresh cement, and re-cemented over her, possibly raising the general level of the flooring an inch or two so that she'd be safely covered. A permanent, odorless coffin. Next day, the workmen came back, laid down the cork surfaces on top of it without noticing anything. I suppose he'd used one of their own trowels to smooth it. Then he sent his accessory upstate fast, near where his wife had been several summers before, but to a different farmhouse where she wouldn't be recognized, along with the trunk keys. Sent the trunk up after her, and dropped himself an already used postcard into his mailbox, with the year date blurred. In a week or two, she would probably have committed suicide up there as Mrs. Anna Thorwald. Despondency due to ill health. Written him a farewell note and left her clothes beside some body of deep water. It was risky, but they might have succeeded in collecting the insurance at that. By 9, Boyne and the rest had gone. I was still sitting there in the chair, too keyed up to sleep. Sam came in and said, "Here's Doc Preston." He showed up, rubbing his hands in that way he has. "Guess we can take that cast off your leg now. You must be tired of sitting there all day long doing nothing." Rear Window by Cornell Woolrich, writing as William Irish. It was a long one, but I hope you've enjoyed it, my dears. Whew. Now, I'm going to have the cocktail, the delayed cocktail. Thank you so much for being with me, and I will see you next Wednesday at 6 for Tales and Cocktails. Good night, my dears.